Hello, everybody. My name is Doug Dubay with RECACRIL USA, and I'm here for our most recent webinar. And our guest today is a marine fabricator from A&B Products, Paul Kudley. I had the pleasure of meeting Paul recently at the Marine Fabricators National Convention. He'd been using RECACRIL for several months, and maybe even longer than that. Paul, you'll tell me a little bit later here, but had some kind things to say about the fabric while he stayed in our booth, and the fabricators were actually more interested in listening to him than me, and I figured it might be a good subject for a webinar so more people could hear from Paul. So Paul, welcome to the webinar today, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Doug. I'm pleased to be here and be able to share my experiences with the RECACRIL material.
Great. Paul, you've been in the industry quite a while, 46 plus years, I think you mentioned to me.
46 years last September 3rd. I actually started outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and moved down here in May of 1974. I haven't looked back since.
Wow. And during that time, you've been doing all kinds of canvas work. Yes,
main thing is my forte is doing custom boat canvas, but I also do awnings, cushions, interiors, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, and as we move along here, we'll see a little bit of both. So let's keep moving down the slide line here. That's a nice picture of you there, Paul.
Thank you. That was supposed to be my retirement shirts 4 years ago, but it never happened.
All right, very good. I think we've got a close-up.
Yeah, and that was
there you are.
Since red R176.
Oh, that's some of our fabric.
Right, and that boat was from a repeat customer. It was a 1963 Starcraft that he had restored.
Very nice, very nice. And so this is the kind of work you do in the Orlando area, and the kind of boats you're working with?
Correct. That was, we also redid the interior. He wanted the interior done as completely close to as original as possible. So we did it. The boat was painted red, and he had upgraded the motor, but other than that, everything was original.
Very nice. Let's move on to the next slide. And that looks like some of our RECACRIL in the shop. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what it's like to work with RECACRIL in your shop.
This is actually RA47171, the turquoise. The cover was already patterned off the boat, and it was in the truck being ready to be sewn up. The fabric works wonderful. The hand is fantastic. There's no shrinkage in sewing. The fabric is real stable. As you can see, I'm using Tanara thread. I'm using the smallest needle I can use, and there's been an issue in the past with the material shrinking up, but this material has such a nice hand, it doesn't do that.
Now, by shrinking up, can you describe what you mean by that?
Thread shrinkage. When you're sewing the materials, the thread wants to shrink. And I have done a lot of research in the past to find out. I've been using Gore-Tex for 35 years, well, Tanara now. I had to do a lot of research to find out what the best needle was to use and the fabric to use. And the RECACRIL seems to.
Okay, so you've got a good combination here that's working well for you.
Excellent.
How about cutting the fabric?
Everything I cut, well, you can't really see anything on there, but I cut with pinking shears. I cut the material with pinking shears so it doesn't fray. If you ever look at a cover that's been trailered, which most people do down here in Florida, the underside looks like a rat's nest because it was cut with regular scissors and just frays back. I've always tried to build a better quality product, and that's how I've accomplished that, by cutting with pinking shears.
Well, at RECACRIL, we weave our fabric with a very dense weave, so it tends to resist fraying already. So I'm sure with the pinking shears, it pretty much eliminates that issue.
Yes, it does. It's a stable material, and the edges don't fray near as bad.
Okay, and what are we looking at here? I see we've moved on to a new project.
Right. This is This is the Royal Tweed, Blue Tweed R772 in the process of being fabricated on the boat. We put together the material, what we call a blank. Then the blank is fabricated, and that's all marked out with sidewalk chalk, so it comes off. And as you can see, it's marked to fit the rub rail, and then from there I sew a piece of material around we call edging that has rope in it. And then the X's are for tie downs that tie it down to the trailer. And when I do make these covers, I make them with a vent in the front and in the rear to prevent the water from pocketing, number one, and number two, to help try and get the moisture out. But it's pretty.
That's an issue in your part of the country, isn't it?
Yeah, people have asked me for 46 years if it's going to mildew, and I say, yeah, unless you want to move out of Florida. We live in a subtropical climate, and you're always going to have that issues. That's one of the reasons why I put temp holes in it, and also recommended to people after, that's a picture of my house in the background, and also recommended to people if they're storing it near a house to go out and buy a cheap fan and put a fan in the boat to circulate the air, because the worst thing in the world is stagnant air inside of a boat because you get a lot of mildew from it.
Yeah, and you know, all our other brands, but our brand too, is a woven fabric, and it is breathable to some degree, but it's woven so tightly that air doesn't flow easily through the fabric, so it's good to find other ways to keep that air moving in there.
And I've been using these vent temp holes for about 25, maybe 30 years. They work really, really well. And the pole goes inside of them, so they're adjustable. And it, you know, anything is better than nothing, especially down here in Florida with the moisture we always have in the air. So it does help cut down on it.
Now this cover here, is that 2 panels of RECACRIL sewn together, sort of traveling from the front to the back of the boat?
No, they're sewn crossways. They're sewn crossways in the boat. There's actually 5 panels sewn together. I sew them crossways ways, and you use a lot less material, and it seems to be easier to work with. If you go to length of the boat, you use a lot more fabric, I believe. And that was the way I was taught, and I'm kind of an old school guy, so we'll go crossways.
Yeah, I think it gives it a little more strength. There's more threads in the length of the fabric, so it probably gives more strength across the fabric and the cover in the boat. Yeah, and when you're sewing those panels of fabric, do you find that our fabric comes out at the other end at the same length? In other words, sometimes with a walking foot, you can get your panels coming out different lengths on the other side of the seam or the panel.
Yeah, the fabric doesn't shrink. That was what I was explaining earlier when you're sewing it.
Yeah.
Okay, and I usually take the pieces and I transfer tape them together. It just makes it easier to sew it. And then the pieces are just about assured that they're the same length. And the stability in marking out the cover is just unbelievable. I can put the cover on there and not have to pull it tight again. Or in other incidences, you have to take and reclamp the material to get a good snug fit. Because it's like painting a car. What you're looking at now is the finished product. And the finished product is what you want to have come out nice. And that's why you look at the cover and it fits the boat so nice.
Yep, and when you put all that work into it, and it's a perfect fit when you install it, you want them to look that way a year or 2 or 3 or 5 later too, and that's what we try to accomplish with RECACRIL.
Definitely.
All right, let's see what's the next slide reveals here. Oh, that's right, you do some awning work too, and these bullnose awnings are pretty tricky, but that looks to have a really good fit, the fabric on the frame there, which can be complicated.
Well, the material itself is easy to work with and fabricate with. These were kind of a unique deal because these were steel stapled stitched on, which I normally don't do. I normally put an awning rail track across the back and then pull it out. And I had a younger fella, he came to install these for me because my hands were so screwed up from doing this stuff. And he knew what he was doing, so I had him come. I did fit them. Naturally, they were fit hung, but the stability of the material just to work with, as you could tell, it just fits the frame so nice.
Yeah, it does. But I got to admit, our fabric tends to be a little stiffer than the name brand fabric. Have you found that to be the case? Yes,
this is true. The fabric has a much better hand to it, where it's easier to work with. And once again, there's no stretch or shrinkage or anything else. Where you put it, it pretty much stays. It doesn't have a mind of its own.
Okay.
Or it does have
So
a
you
mind.
don't have to cut it. You don't have to cut it a little bit short to plan for the stretch that's eventually going to happen, because it's not.
Correct. There is no stretch in it whatsoever.
Okay. Let's see. Have you got a picture of the finished product there? Yeah, that looks great.
This is for a customer I've been doing work for about 25 years. He's a real hell of a nice guy, and he took the awnings down, or actually the painters took the awnings down when they painted the house, and then he and the painters reinstalled them back up in the house. So they came out really, really well. They had a lot of class to the house.
Yeah, that's a classy color combination with those different neutrals together there. Very nice.
That is the R127 Moon Rock color.
Yeah, it's sort for those. It's a little bit warmer than a gray, sort of a taupish color. Our Moon Rock, beautiful color. Very nice.
His wife picked the color to paint the house from the fabric.
Oh, she had nice taste. That's a beautiful job.
Yep, she did.
All right. So let's move on to the next slide here. And all right, we're getting back to the marine work here. Is there anything you wanted to tell me about this? It's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a custom-made 4-bow Bimini top. My normal tops are 90 inches. This top happened to be 8'6" long. Thus the 4 bows in it. And it has stanchions in the front and in the rear because the customer wanted more stability.
Okay.
And
well, with those stanchions, you really don't have a lot of adjustability like a strap that can be cinched tighter as the fabric stretched or grew.
Correct. And that is very true, because we don't have to worry about that because the fabric does not stretch. When that top will look the same 3 years from now, 5 years from now, as it did in that picture sitting in my driveway.
Yeah, well, that looks great. And I'm sure those stanchions do provide a lot of stability for that thing.
Yeah, and I have there is a clip that goes on there to hold the stanchions back. A lot of people use snaps or straps. I have this plastic clip when they fold it all down. And if you happen to notice on the deck of the boat, there is 2 mounts. There's a mount directly in front of that mount, because when the top lays back, it would hit the motor. So I put the other mount on there for storage. So there's a mount on there for when the top is up, and there's a mount on there when the top is down. And I always try to be careful to make sure that I cover the front of the console and also the back seat. And then you also have to take into consideration, you see the poles and the rocket launchers, the holes in the back of the leaning post.
Yep.
Those are there, so
Yep.
I make sure the top is clear enough forward so that the customer can put his rods in when the Bimini is up.
Okay. There's a lot to consider when you're talking about the positioning of that Bimini there.
Yeah, there's a heck of a lot, and I get some customers that are really kind of picky. So when that happens, I let them come and we install the top together. I only do it once, and the customer has to deal with it, and I want to make sure he's happy with the product I finish.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's move on to another slide here. Well, this is just a general slide here. I think this came from our lab of some test pieces, sample pieces, but the title says, "Why RECACRIL?" And I guess it's one more chance for you to share with us maybe some of the reasons you moved to RECACRIL. It was fairly recently, wasn't it, that you moved over to RECACRIL, Paul, or have you been using it a while?
I actually was using RECACRIL about 10, 12 years ago. And then when the other company came out with a 10-year warranty and RECACRIL didn't follow at that current time, you couldn't give it away just because of the 10-year warranty.
Yeah.
And I have gone back to it since my supplier has gone to it. They went to it over a year or so ago, and I just like the material because it's better. The hand on it is much better, like I said. The shrinkage it's just, the weave is tighter. The water repellency, just the whole fabric in general, I feel is a better quality fabric to work with for the fabricator on my end.
Yeah, well, sounds like you've been working with the fabric longer than I've been with RECACRIL, Paul, but I joined RECACRIL about a little over 6 years ago, and you're right. At that time, they had the 5-year warranty, and they get their fibers from the same mill that the name brand does, and very similar fade resistance color for color, but I told the RECACRIL family that if they really wanted to make an impact in the American market, they had to up their warranty. And to their credit, they made a decision right there to do it, and they've stood behind that warranty ever since. And fortunately, with the quality of their fabric, it's really not much of an issue for us in that we get very few claims. But I'm glad you're happy with it. And Paul, I certainly appreciate you spending a little time with us this morning, sharing with us about the RECACRIL fabric, and it was great meeting with you, and loved having you in the booth there. You were sort of the star of the show for us there, and glad you could join us today. So thanks again, and thanks for everybody tuning in and watching, and hopefully we'll catch you on the next webinar.